Hello and welcome to the Modern Fairy Sightings Podcast, where we listen to people's fairy encounters. But take heed, we're not talking about winged Tinkerbells here. These are real fairies, real encounters that took people like you and I by surprise. Stay a while and hear their stories. My name is Jo Hickey Hall, and I'm a folklore researcher. Dear listener, I hope you're well. This episode is all about experiences that took place while our guest was on a vision quest in the Rocky Mountains. At this time of year in England, the turn into autumn, there's a natural retreating inwards, and it's not always possible to get much time alone or away from our routines when we lead busy lives. Not all of us can go away on retreats and quests, but even giving ourselves a little more time before we go to sleep at night or some time in the evening can provide that sense of stillness and reflection that we yearn for at a deep place within ourselves as we head into the dark months. I've enjoyed reading all your messages, and some of you are writing in with your own experiences. These encounters are so rich and really add to the body of research that we're building together, so if you'd like to discuss your experience off record, that is something we can do. It doesn't always necessarily need to appear on the podcast. Thank you to the Curious crew for their generous support of this project. Really could not do this without them, and if you are enjoying it, you can choose to join us at Patreon and get lots of bonus material and join our community, or you can find me on Buy Me a Coffee if you'd like to do that. I hope you enjoy listening to this chat. We ended up having a discussion about the general state of transition we've been in over the last few years. I do believe that the increase in reported fairy encounters in these times is not a coincidence. We are in the process of understanding this world in a different way than we ever did before. Time to
I guess you could say I've had several experiences, and I think I'll start off with one here in Canada. I was in the Rocky Mountains doing a vision quest, and part of that vision quest means you've got no anything to write on, you can't read any books, there's no technology, there's nothing to eat, it's just water, and you have a fire to keep you warm in these high mountains, and you sleep in a tent. So that's sort of setting that part up, and of course I'm surrounded by many wild animals, although I tend to think of them as partners. And on the day that we were setting up the tent, we'd already walked, I would say, 2 or 3 miles with a significant amount of weight carrying a backpack.
Yeah.
So the area that we ended up in was actually by a large flowing stream with a bit of a waterfall, not very big, but enough to call it a waterfall. And of course, it's just the forest, and there's no man-made sounds, it's just nature. And the sun was out, and it was quite peaceful. And anyway, I was helping getting the tent up, and I could hear children.
Right, yeah.
And I could hear children laughing and sounding like a really noisy group. And I said to the guide, at the time, the chief that had brought me out on this vision quest, is there a children's camp around here? And he said, no. And I said, well, I can hear all these children. They're laughing and playing and they're making quite a ruckus. And it sounds like they just camped, maybe 200 feet away from us. That's how loud the volume was. And he said to me, oh, that's the little people.
Oh.
So the little people were with me at that time. And while I was at the site, I had a lone wolf come and visit me physically.
Amazing.
And I had a giant grizzly come and visit me.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Physically.
Yeah.
And I had a rather fat porcupine come and visit me.
Oh.
And when you do a vision quest, part of that is about getting rid of all the noise that the monkey mind makes.
Yeah.
So you can connect to your higher self and get messages. And that's literally what happened. But the way that all of these things unfolded, I won't go into the deeper details of what happened, but when we actually went back to connect with some elders, they were all very surprised at what had unfolded for me, because some of the information I was given was actually quite significant spiritually. And they the uncle of the guide, who is also a shaman, he said to me, it's not normal what you received to get, because those are usually held for our people, not white people. So I thought that was very interesting. And then another time, when I was in New Zealand, we were in the bush, my partner and I, and a friend, and we were up a very high mountain again. And this was once originally an old gold mine. So we'd gone there to look for amethysts, and we got totally disorientated. The bush in New Zealand's quite dense once you get off the beaten track. And so we were completely lost. And we decided to head towards where the sun was starting to go down, so that we would have light for longer. And my partner went through on this ridge that we were going to have to crawl around or walk around. And then his friend followed. And then I went to follow, and I fell. And I actually fell off the ridge.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, so dangerous.
But then this huge gust of wind came and pushed me up onto the ridge, having fallen or falling. So this gust of wind pushed me up onto the ridge, and I grabbed onto the bushes. And of course I was really shaken, but I gingerly made my way around, and I was asking for help, praying for help. And I heard in my head, you will get out just as the sun sets. So then we ended up going back into the thick bush again. And of course the sun's starting to go down. And we just made our way out of the thick bush into less thicker bush, where we could see a bit better. And then maybe another 5 minutes after that, we actually found a path that then brought us down to the car park where we parked the vehicle.
Oh my goodness.
And just as we got to the car park, the sunset had completely gone. So that was...
What was the feeling like up at the ridge? What was the sense there? Did you sense anything before you fell?
Yeah, there was we were definitely being helped, because when you get really disorientated like that, your sense of where you truly are, unless you're very experienced, which we weren't at doing those sorts of things, you can, that old thing they show in the movies where you end up going around in a complete circle. You start off with, so that can literally happen. So I felt as though we were being helped, but when I fell off the ridge, I thought, oh God, this is it, I'm gonna be custard in a second. And fortunately that didn't happen. But again, it shocked me that gust happened and pushed me up. Now it wasn't like I'd fallen 10 feet, but I reckon I'd fallen at least 4 or 5 feet before I was pushed up by this gust of wind. So I literally was feeling the fall, and then the gust happened, and then I was up on the ridge again.
Yes.
So that was pretty spooky. It's like everything else. I think if you're respectful of the environment you're in, I think that helps.
Healing has helped me many times in my life when I'd reached a point where something needed to change. In 2005, I trained with Martin Brofman to learn the body mirror system of healing, which was life-changing for me. It's based on the idea that the parts of your body that don't work well reflect the parts of your life that don't work well, and about which you have tension in your consciousness. The understanding is that tension is stress, and stress causes symptoms. In a distance healing or in-person session, I move up the chakras, returning each one to wholeness using a colour map. During the process, I see images and situations, I hear words or receive impressions that tell me something about what caused the tension in that person's life. The feedback at the end of the session is a really big part of the healing. If you're interested in a chakra healing session, you can contact me at scarletofthefae@gmail.com. Most definitely. Yeah, most definitely. I think sometimes the actual place itself as well has its own sort of energy, as if it had a personality. I do remember climbing a mountain one time. We were woefully unprepared, and quite shamefully unprepared, really. We'd gone along with a party of friends and for climbing, but I had not really got the correct footwear for the job, but when we reached the top, I got the fear, and what I met there felt to me like the Morrigan. Now I've never had any real connection with the Morrigan, actually, not purposefully, not consciously. But I can't. That was the sense. That was where they made themselves known, and it was really frightening, actually, right at the top there. And I did make it over a ridge, a very dangerous ridge at the top. And this is just a mountain in the UK. This isn't kind of anything like the sort of heights that you would have been over there. But you certainly meet nature face to face in places like that, and you really have to go to a higher place within yourself, don't you, to meet it, to when you're in a sticky situation like that. So with the quest trip, I mean, that's amazing. What sort of animals were there while you were there? so there were wolves and bears and
grizzlies. There's a difference between black bears and grizzlies. It's not that you want to dance with either of them, but you seriously don't want a grizzly near you because they're no nonsense, right? They're very, very territorial, and they're very what's the word? Personally, I think they're very intuitive animals, but maybe I'm giving them a bit too much people characteristics, because they definitely are their own entity. But having a grizzly come to your tent and not do anything, and I could hear it, like I was literally like the distance between me and the grizzly was the thickness of the tent wall. So it was right beside the tent. And they make a heck of a ruckus. They're not delicate. They're quite noisy. But it just knew that, the way the guide explained it to me was, they know why we're there. It's not like, and they know I'm not there to do any harm, and they know my energy is different because of what I'm doing, and it knows that.
Well, this is it. I mean, maybe they're attracted in some way. I mean, I know that sounds a bit silly, maybe just to say that, and it sounds a bit naive, but I know that when, I'm meditating, dogs and cats are attracted by that, and children. They will want to come and sit on you, hug you, be next to you, rub themselves against you, because you are, we know what you're giving out with your energy is something that they want to be close to. So I just wonder whether that might have been a factor. Do you think that?
Oh, for sure. And now that, because I'm a hypnotherapist, I know that, when I do hypnotherapy, I have to tell the clients, please don't have any animals near you, because they will sit on you during the hypnotherapy. It's because your energy shifts.
Yeah, totally.
Right. And your ego isn't in charge. It's the real you that's there. So I wouldn't be surprised, because you go into a heightened state when you're in a vision quest. If the energy's very, very similar, if not the same. So I do think that has a bearing for sure.
And did they, with the wolf and the bear, I mean, were you able to get some insight into the meaning of that? I mean, obviously I don't want to pry in any kind of personal level, but that must have been.
I did. Well, let's put it this way. Most people, when you do a vision quest, you're presented with one animal that then becomes like part of your totem. But I was given two, and the two that I was given, when we talked to the shaman and the elders, they were quite shocked at one of the ones that I was given. And it kind of, to put it, it kind of came a bit of gossip for them, because they're going, this white woman's been given this sign, oh my God. So I didn't realize the significance, because it's just, I'm having this experience, but for them it meant something to them. And later on, when I got to know the shaman really well, he explained to me later why it was so significant for them. But it's not that I can't share it, but out of respect for them.
No, that's quite right. Yeah, that's
fine.
No, that's absolutely fine. And so with the children's voices then, so just to get an idea, how many of you were on this vision quest? Was it just yourself and the teacher, or right? Okay. And they were also staying in a tent nearby, or?
Well, yes. They were actually about, probably half a mile away.
So you were there on your own. Wow, that is a really amazing experience, isn't it?
Yeah.
A lot to think about there. I've just got these images in my mind of being in the tent, and
Yeah, it was pretty, it's really interesting too, because you'd think I would be feeling really afraid, but I wasn't.
No.
I wasn't afraid of the grizzly, and I wasn't afraid of the wolf.
No.
It was all just there. It was all just part of what I was in.
Yeah. Did you ever actually sleep?
Oh, yeah.
You did. Yeah, you were able to sleep.
Yeah, I had the best sleeps. I was in a deep, deep, deep sleep.
I bet. Did you have amazing dreams then?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
So that was the visioning, the quest journey.
Yeah.
Right.
Big, profound dreams. And
when you came back from your vision quest, did your dreams change afterwards? And did you ever sense first of all, did your dreams change after that?
I don't think so. It's interesting how my awareness for my environment changed.
That was my next question. Did your relationship with animals change after that?
Well, I've always been able to hang out with animals, and animals like me, and it doesn't matter what it is, it always does. So that part didn't change, but I believe my appreciation for animals changed. Not that I didn't have a deep love for them before that, but I think it was just this sense of, okay, so we're in it together.
Yeah.
It's not that's a cat and that's a dog. It's like, no, these are my, for lack of a better description, siblings, albeit furry ones, but they're part of what I'm in, and they might not be able to express things the way humans do, but they certainly have feelings, and they certainly know who we are. So it was the consciousness, I think, that came with it. We're all sharing it, right?
Definitely. Thank you. And did you ever sense, what were your feelings now when you look back on the voices that you heard, the laughter, the children's laughter?
Well, obviously I can still recall it. It's like a tape recorder. It just plays and I can hear it. So it's like a imprint, really. I think that's what happens when you have significant experiences, is you don't have to think about it. It just is there. And things that don't really mean much to you, they become meaningless, so you can't recall it and you forget the names, and it just goes on and on. It's like it doesn't need to be remembered.
No. Had your teacher, how would you refer to the person that was with you for the vision quest?
A guide.
Did your guide, had they seen the little people before? What was their relationship with the little people?
Well, they grew up understanding nature and all its complexities, because that's how they were taught to see and hear. And I'm not saying others can't see and hear like that, because that would be ridiculous. But when you're encouraged to think that way and understand that way, then there's no barriers to your awareness for those things. And it's just all perfectly natural.
And so what did you feel when you heard the children's laughter? If you could just describe any of that a little more, what they sounded like, and how your own emotional reaction to that was. Are you able to remember?
Yeah, definitely, because it just feels like yesterday. It's one of those impactful things you don't forget. So honestly, they just sounded like I was beside a playground with kiddies running around outside that are maybe 9 years and younger, just all screaming with laughter and running around and making a heck of a racket. And I felt a bit disbelief. It was like, oh, we're way up here. It must be a campground of kids, because why would there be kids up here?
Mm.
And of course, we're talking high up in the mountains. We're not talking down low. And so I just figured, well, there must be a campground nearby, because I didn't know the area. And it's one of the sacred areas for these people. So it was a privilege to be there anyway. But to then think that there were children around, I was a bit like perplexed. But then as soon as the guide said, well, it's the little people, it just all clicked. I was like, oh, okay. There's no people to disturb their space, so they can be here all the time.
Yeah. And did you sense their presence during the night at all, or was it more about the nature itself in the area?
What's really interesting when you go into yourself in a very significant way, because it ended up being 7 days in total, but there's 5 days in which, you're not eating, you're only drinking water from the river or the stream.
You're ingesting the environment as well.
Yeah. And you see the stars at nighttime. You got a fire going. It doesn't take long to alter your behavior that you would normally be being presented to others as well as yourself. You're more you, because there's nothing to distract you. So you start to get more in tune with just everything, like the way the wind is, the sun, the bugs, the noises of the forest, the crackling of the fire, the water. It all becomes magnified. And then after a while, it just all feels very harmonious. Like, sounds a bit odd, but it's like you're in a vein of bliss, because there's nothing else to react to except yourself. And the monkey mind can only keep chatting for so long, and then it shuts down. So after the first day, I was pretty much done, but for some people it takes longer. And just having that time for yourself, where it's not about anything but you just being present, fully present for the duration of time that you're there. So you feel, mentally your mind expands, and emotionally your heart expands, and there's that sense of true deep contentment, because that's that sense of belonging in the environment that you're in and beyond.
Beautiful. And it does sound entirely blissful to be in a situation like that, the way that we would have lived in harmony with the environment, part of the environment, and partnering with the creatures that live on the land as well, and in the air. And must be a real privilege to experience that.
I think, to be totally frank, I think that's part of the reason why so many of us just feel so disconnected.
Yeah.
Because we just never have had the opportunity, or won't take the opportunity, to try something like this.
Yeah, not many people would be able to, I guess, but this is where even just connecting on some level with your local environment really helps, whether it's a bird that visits, near your window if you're in apartments, or whether it's, the stream that's nearby, that's, near the city that you live in, a tree in your local park that is there. Even on that level, you can go some way to connect. And once you have that connection, as you say, it does affect you emotionally and mentally, and it's a start. I would say it's like crossing a threshold and stepping into a new state in that you perceive the world in a different way. I mean, what you experienced must have been absolutely incredible. But it can also work just as, it can help people with huge shifts and help them ground and feel anchored, just even on very sort of simple, what we might see as simple levels. But I mean, how valuable and precious that is, really. And it's great that lots of people are now doing that with nursery age and early primary school age children and older, but just getting those sort of experiences, opening them up to children at a young age, so that they can relate to that way of being as well. It's in a lot of places that's tied into the curriculum now in some way, which thankfully that is a very welcome shift.
There's also some other little fairy stories I can share. So my husband and I live on a river, and we're very much aware of the power of water. And of course, it means that I guess you could say we really appreciate the environment that we're in. One, because we know how lucky we are, but two, because the energy that you get by living by a river. And as a result of that, we have a huge amount of orbs that hang around our house. You take pictures and there's just hundreds and hundreds of them. And then to go into another scenario, my husband smokes, and he was making fun. I can't remember what he was making fun of, but he was making fun of something to do with the water spirits down at the river. And for about 3 months straight, every time he went to light a cigarette, the mouth and the inhalant part of the cigarette, not the end, was always flipped around. So he'd go to light the cigarette and he'd be lighting the end of the top of the cigarette, not the bottom of the cigarette. So that happened. So we kept telling him, you better go and apologize, because we're using up a lot of cigarettes here for you to be so egotistical. So
great.
He went and apologized.
Yeah. And that put it right in the end.
Yeah, it came right, but it took about 3 months. They were really not happy.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah, it sounds like you live in a really beautiful place up there then. So you're in the Rocky Mountains, but you're originally from New Zealand then?
Yeah, we're at the back. So where the Vision Quest was in the Rocky Mountains, but I live basically down near Vancouver. It's about 2 hours out, but I live in the mountains out here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Yeah, you must be very close to nature up there. Do people, talk about the little people very much up there?
No, it's really interesting. So like when I was living in England, nobody batted an eyelid if you started talking about fairies or fae or anything along those lines. And here it's seen as a bit weird and a bit strange. And you may find people who believe in it, but they won't willingly talk about it.
Okay. Yeah. Why do you think that is then?
I think I'm going to stick my neck out here a bit, but I think just in general, people here in North America, because Christianity did such a number on everybody, anything that's not perceived as along those lines is very, if you're a Wiccan or Druid or anything, even Buddhist, if you're outside of those boxes that they've put there, sadly it's had a huge impact on society in a negative that way. So talking about fairies is a big fat no. Talking about UFOs is definitely a big fat. Oh yeah.
But you must get instances of UFOs like that. Are UFOs more along the kind of kooky line than fairies, would you say? I'm always interested in that.
I'd say they're about the same.
Would you? Okay. Yeah, that is quite different then, isn't it? To the culture over here in the UK.
And yet, interestingly enough, when I was executive director for 2000 seniors, I did an event and I spoke openly about UFOs. Well, you could have dropped a pin in the room when I was talking about it. But when I finished and the event was done, I think I had about 80 people couldn't wait to talk to me about UFOs.
Wow. Okay. So all it takes is just to open the door of the possibility, and people really want to share. Gosh, it's a real need, isn't it? It's a need to share because people know in their hearts that it's meaningful. It's awful. The idea that, because somebody's set down the way that things should be, that you're not allowed to talk about certain subjects like this that are incredibly meaningful to people. So what were you saying about UFOs?
Oh, just experiences I'd had with UFOs.
Oh, I'd love to hear those too.
Oh,
if you'd like to, if you have time.
Well, I actually saw a UFO about, oh gosh, it'd be about probably 10 or 11 months ago now. Oh no, it's not even that long. Probably 8 months ago. And I just felt this need to look up, and I saw this giant silver disc in the sky, and my daughter was with me at the time, and I'm going, look, and she's going, oh my God, is that a UFO? And I'm going, yep. And then my neighbor is quite open-minded, but she's not Canadian, she's from another culture, and I knocked on her door and I said, do you want to see a UFO? And she goes, yep. So I got her and she got the binoculars out, and then I got my husband, he got the binoculars out. And then once they'd seen it for, I don't know, 5 minutes, they went back inside. But there was a guy walking up the street and he goes, what are you looking at? And I showed him, I said, look up there, what do you think you're seeing? He goes, I don't know. I said, well, do you think it's not moving and it's just hanging there? Do you think it might be a UFO? And he goes, I've never seen a UFO. I don't know. I said, well, just look at it for a bit longer through the binoculars. And he goes, I think you're right. I think it's a UFO. And he said, I'm a surveyor. He goes, I'm going to get my equipment out and have a look.
Oh, wow.
Like, okay.
Yeah.
So off he went. So that was the most recent. But there was one way high up in the mountains, and we go there to watch sunsets, because you see the Milky Way, and it's just an open sky surrounded by massive mountains. And again, we were looking out and I saw a big bright light coming towards the direction in which we were sitting. And I said to my husband, that's a UFO. And he goes, it is not, because we get planes as well, right? So, and I go, no, this is different. And it got closer and closer and closer. And then he said, oh my God, I think you're right. I think it is a UFO. And my daughter was there. She goes, it is. And then all of a sudden, it just vanished. Like it was there and then it was not there. So that was that one.
Yeah. Did you feel anything from that at all, or the other one?
Well, this is going to sound really odd, but I almost got the impression that they were trying to see who was seeing them, and identifying those individuals rather
Yeah.
than a UFO experience per se, if that makes sense. It was almost like, oh, who's paying attention? Oh, you're paying attention.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories of people, when the UFO enters their consciousness in some way, they see it, they sense it and look up, then the beings, or maybe is the object UFO energy itself, if that itself is a consciousness, it then responds, and there is some kind of reaction or connection between the experiencer and the object, or those beings that might be with that UFO. I've been reading Paul Sinclair, who is a brilliant researcher in the UK on UFOs up around East Yorkshire. And he's written this book called Truth Proof. And a lot of people tell these stories that they are watching the lights, and then the lights come down and they just take a good look at them. Right. And then, sometimes some other things happen too, but this is the sort of thing that is shared over and over again, that there is some engagement relating going on between the human being and these lights, these sparks of consciousness, or whatever they are. And I mean, so you weren't frightened then, I take it?
No. And when I was in my 20s, I had an experience sitting on the beach in New Zealand, and it was pitch dark, and I was with my boyfriend and another couple, and we were looking out to sea, and all of a sudden this enormous light shone on the ocean from up high in the clouds, and it must have lit up 20k. I mean, it was just huge, and it was so bright. It was like it lit up us on the foreshore, but it was miles and miles away from us.
What color was it?
It was like a creamy white. And it hung there for, I would say, 1 or 2 minutes. It's a bit hard to tell because it's been a wee while since I spoke about it. But at the time I was saying, oh my God, it's a UFO. And they were going, oh, a UFO, oh my God. Because at first they thought it was a plane. I'm going, it's not a plane. It's not a plane. And then, of course, because it was hidden in the clouds, you couldn't see the shape or anything. And then literally the light was turned off, and we didn't hear anything or see anything. But that was crazy because, 1 minute you're sitting at the beach around a bonfire, and the next minute the whole area is lit up.
Yeah.
And you look out.
Yeah, I don't know whether you heard, there was a recent episode on the podcast from a woman in New Zealand who was talking about being there when she was a child and seeing this huge sun appear. I mean, I know that there are certain weather conditions that people say that this can be related to, but I'd really like to, I really wonder if any other people in New Zealand have experienced that too.
It's all a bit of a mystery.
Yeah.
But one of the things I want to share with you, when my husband was growing up, he was trained to understand the forest and Mother Nature. And so one of the things he had to do as a 5-year-old kid was go down into a bear cave and wake the bear up, and then once he knew the bear was definitely awake, run out of the bear cave. They had no food, right? So then they would kill the bear and use every bit.
Oh my goodness me. Wow. And sorry, just to say a bit about the culture of your husband, could you give a bit of a background on that then?
So he's a First Nations person.
Right.
And he's a traditional chief, which is different from a government chief.
Okay. Oh, right. I did not know this. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he yeah, he's a whole story all by himself. But in a nutshell, his upbringing was sadly residential, which is the horrific thing that happened to all First Nations people.
Oh, that's really dreadful. Yeah.
And he was also brought up in the traditional ways as well, which is harder to find because of the damage that was done to his parents and the parents before them. So, you know, to get someone to have those experiences isn't common. But anyway, he was, and it's kind of like a rite of passage. So first you learn how to get the bear. And in one of the situations, the bear, when he was shot, and to put it in context, so they don't just shoot willy-nilly, and the bear was shot with one bullet. So the guy that shot it was a crack shot, because bears don't always go down with one shot. So as he was getting out of the bear cave, the bear actually collapsed on him and brought him down the mountainside.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
And he woke up beside a dead bear, thank goodness, because he would have been toast otherwise. But just that sensation of smelling the bear and being with the bear as the bear transitioned, and having that as a memory, you know, obviously had a huge impression on a 5-year-old kid. And then when he was 12, he had to learn to walk in the forest so that none of the creatures knew where he was. So he could only harvest what he needed. And one of the tests was he had to stand within the forest itself behind a tree. And then as a moose, a deer, and a bear went by, each one, he had to smack them on the bum so that they would take off out of fear, right? Because you shock them. But to hide from those animals like that, to have that energy where people don't know you're there, that's a skill. And that's what he had to learn.
Yeah, to make yourself invisible.
Yeah. So because he can do that with me now, although I've cottoned onto him. But when I first was with him, he'd be walking right behind me and I had no clue.
I mean, you'd think that the animals would be able to smell his scent. So it must be closing down on so many levels that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's really, like, for example, and this sounds a bit foolhardy, but he was trained to do this. And like I say, it's not common practice because unfortunately not all the traditions were passed down. But when he goes into a forest, he knows where everything is. He knows there's a deer a couple of miles away because he can sense it. He can shut himself down, so he becomes like a radar.
Yeah.
And one time he was with a friend in the forest and he saw a giant grizzly. Well, I don't know if you've ever met a grizzly before, but these things are huge. They're absolutely huge. Like, people can't appreciate the scale of them, but it's just, they're like 6 feet when they're standing on all 4 legs. So they got huge heads, right?
Jeez Louise, yeah.
And they stink. They're not perfumed by any stretch. And the grizzly was across the water from him, not a very wide stream, and started to talk to the bear, talk to the grizzly in his own language. And the grizzly left him alone. Usually when a grizzly sees you by the water, he doesn't want you there. So he lets you know, you better get out of here because this is mine. But he talked to the grizzly and the grizzly just stayed. And he stayed. And then he, on his little transmitter thing, contacted his friend and said, there's a grizzly here. You better not come up this way. And the guy just says, I'm heading for the truck. I'll see you later.
Yeah. Blimey.
Yeah.
It's another world altogether. Is he going to pass any of these amazing gifts on to anybody else?
Well, yes. There's always ways and means in which it's taught. And like everything else, you know, we live in the Western world right now, so making room for culture is obviously important to us, but it's not as strong as we would like, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
It's finding opportunities to pass the information on to the right people.
Yes. That's very true, because it is an honor, isn't it? And a privilege to know these things. And you're right, it has to be, you know, protected and handled carefully, doesn't it? You know, how do you feel about, you know, where we are right now? Do you think that there's a sense that we may swing back towards the balanced way in which we used to live our lives?
I think it's very interesting. His people have an oral story that they share with anybody that's prepared to work. And they say that man, this is the 4th cycle for man on the planet, that we've had 3 others where we have done so much harm to the earth that the earth then destroyed what was made.
Yeah.
And now we're in the 4th cycle. And if we don't get this right, then man will never return to this earth. And he's always maintained that the way man is heading right now, it's not looking good for man, because his greed knows no bound. He's not very hopeful for humanity. He goes, you know, we don't love Mother Earth the way Mother Earth loves us, and Mother Earth is always feeding us and making sure that we're okay, but we just keep taking from her and expecting more. And he goes, at some point this has to be balanced.
Our only hope is that humanity actually takes it into our own hands and stop those who are responsible for pushing, you know, towards this end with their greed, because I feel like there are many, many more of us who aren't like that.
For sure.
Many more.
And that's what stops the tip of the curve from completely falling, is that there's enough groundswell, but it's the people at the top, the greed factor. That's what's holding us ransom. So until you people like you and I stand up to these people and say no more, only then will we save it. There's some very, very, there's a lot of information, I think, that is not shared because of the harm that could happen as a result of it being shared by those that want to control everything. Until we go back to, like you were saying, a more simplistic way, a bit more how we used to be, where we took care of Mother Nature, the way she takes care of us, and give thanks to what she gives us, it will be very challenging for people, I think. And there's such a disconnect, you know, the idea that we're going into a metaverse environment, it's just bonkers. So until we realize actually we should be focusing on how to help Mother Earth and work within her cycles and understand that there's relevance for everything that she does. We're still 1 foot in and 1 foot out.
That's it. I think the difference is, you know, the big shift that could aid this is coming together, because of course there is so much division sown everywhere that people feel they have less in common with each other, and sort of there are competing goals, but actually, we have more in common with each other than ever, I would say, because we've all been through this together these last few years. We are facing the same risks in terms of, of the global risk to the environment and the way that we're headed. But if we only recognize that there are no divisions between us and the land, between each other, between ourselves and our fellow animals and creatures that we share this planet with, then we have hope. I do stay hopeful. Personally, I feel hopeful, but I can completely understand the perspective that other people's perspective, if they're feeling hopeless about it as well, because there's a lot to be hopeless about, to feel hopeless about. But I don't know, there's something within me that feels very strongly that we can do this, and that we are doing this. That we are doing this. It's not so apparent yet in the external world.
Right.
That's my own musings.
Yeah, no, I think it's great, Jo. That needs to be said out loud more and more, because I just think there are so many people still asleep in this walking world, and there's so many people who want to, make this happen. Put kindness at the forefront of life, not greed, and to work humanely with each other, not see each other as objects. That if we don't grab this and tell the kids, look, every generation goes through something, and we're going through this right now, so know this will change too, but you have to want to do good and keep vigilant on that in order for it to unfold. As Joseph Campbell says, when we have no more myths, the society crumbles. And I think that's what's happening, is the myths are changing, and we just don't have the appetite to listen to it.
I really hope not. I guess one positive aspect is that people are becoming more and more interested in nature and ecology. They're becoming interested in foraging and growing their own food, meditation, coming together in groups to do good work for one another, speaking out, protesting about these matters and then finding ways to change policy, coming together and fighting that which we see, which is, we know in our hearts, is completely wrong. I'd say there are more and more people waking up now in the last few years, and the momentum has really, really gone up many, many notches, I would say. But we've still got a long way to go, and I feel that it's not going to be easy either. It's very bumpy, but I think you're absolutely right in talking to our young people about this. For many young people that are coming up now, they're just looking at the world and they're just completely devastated by what they see before them, and they're frightened, and they're angry. I've coming into this world, and this is how you folks are leaving it for us, and are we even going to get through this with everything that's going on? And I feel when, for all of us, but particularly for young people, as you say, to explain that this is something that we all need to get through, and also that have this sense, like many others do, well, we decided to be here at this time. This, you know, if like me, you believe that you come into this life with something that you need to do, and that we have chosen to be here at this time.
Yeah, for sure.
And so there's no point in being frightened or feeling that it's all pointless. There is a point, and usually that point is to do what it is that you love doing, be who you truly are, and in doing so you can make some kind of positive shift. And if everybody does that as far as they can, you know, if they can, then this is what's important: to be awake, as you say, come together and do your thing, whatever that is. And it's going to be different for everybody.
Well, we've all got a role to play, right?
Absolutely.
It's just, I think it's interesting because in England, I've always considered England ahead of the curve, you know, and you come to countries like where I am, and it's like two parallel universes. Those that are First Nations, they have their own things going on, and those that aren't, and they have their things going on. And until awareness is shared, it's not going to be believed.
Yeah, there is definitely a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
So well, I hope you find some groups over there that you can connect with, and, you know, through these difficult times, because I think that is everything as well, to find your crew, to find people that you can get through this with. And I hope that that's something that you and your husband can do.
Well, we've been advocating for years, so this is not new to me. But I think what I'm trying to express is the fact that, you know, the new system's already here.
Yeah.
But we're not incongruent with it. And this is causing problems because it's like people don't trust what's out there, so they're not trusting. So therefore they go back to the old habits, and you don't create harmony when everyone's at a misstep. So how do you get people harmonious? Well, the real information has to be shared and understood. And the awareness and the receptivity for that is not as strong as what it was, say, I don't know, maybe even in the 60s when the walls were breaking down. You know, there was much more freedom, I guess you could say, to be who you were, maybe not openly all the time, but you had that choice. And now, you know, everything can be watched, everything can be manipulated, or so this illusion is getting bigger, not smaller. So how do you create grounding in it? Well, you've got to have truth.
Yeah. I think that it's likely that something really big will happen in order for that wall and those lies to fall. I think that it's got to be, that's surely the only thing that can happen. I mean, I think a lot of people have started to wake up because they've realized that things are not matching up with what they're being told. So I think that a lot of people are definitely coming to, but I think it probably will take something quite big, and I imagine that is going to happen in the next year or so. That's my kind of gut feeling on it, but it's how we respond to that and how we play our part in that.
Yeah.
And that's all we can do. I mean, it's very hard when you see people and you know what would help them, you know that they are lost in a way, but you can't do it for them. They have to find that, own path, don't they? It's really hard.
It's like the people who are awake speak one language and the people who are asleep don't even know what you're saying. It's interesting though, isn't it?
It is. It's probably not the only time in the millennia that it's been like this, but it's very, very strange to live in these times, and interesting, and yeah,
It's
all the
provocative.
emotions.
It's provocative.
But look, I mean, the thing is, things are going to come out. That the way, what I say is that you cannot stop the tide, and whoever and whatever these, individuals, groups think they are, and the power that they hold, you cannot stop the tide. You cannot. And that tide was already happening before, 2000, look at 2016, protests everywhere. People were rising up, people were coming together, people were saying no. And you look at like Extinction Rebellion as a really good example.
Yeah.
And they were really doing a lot of excellent pushback work. And that's when things kicked off, right? So, they have tried to stop the tide, but you can't. It's impossible.
Right.
As with the ocean itself, you cannot.
Right.
And so there will be this build-up, which I feel is happening now. It's this build-up. And there will be a point where, it's make or break. And I do feel that enough things will happen between now and then to wake
everybody up.
Yeah, to wake more people up. Yeah, I do.
I really hope so. That's,
me
too. I just wish for goodwill for everybody, and to have a life that is meaningful and rewarding, and to have joy as your day-to-day conversation, not skepticism.
Yeah, well, let's hold that thought. And thank you very much. It's really, really great to speak to you, to hear all the stories of these other lives that can be lived in on our planet at the moment. That's so inspiring, and astonishing tales from the Rockies, just thinking about those wild creatures being so close, and that we can have another relationship, a different relationship with nature that is so fulfilling. Thank you very much for speaking to me.
I hope it's of use.
Time to
Our guest's experience of the wilderness feels like a consciousness to consciousness meeting between our guest and nature itself. A reminder that the way that we're living in our modern Western lives, largely away from the land and natural cycles, is now so out of step with nature, its creatures, and the way we had previously lived for millennia. So it's no surprise that we often feel such disconnect in our daily lives. We still, if we are lucky, surround ourselves with loved ones, but our jobs are often not our real interests. The choices we have to decide how we spend our time and live our lives is limited, and the way we obtain and consume food is restricted and not in keeping with natural cycles, and our understanding of the natural world is far removed to non-existent of that of our ancestors. So how do you feel like that? Could there be another way of living here on this earth? I've been contacted by people previously who have heard laughing that didn't fit with a normal everyday situation, something about the tone or feeling that accompanied it while walking in the wilds. On these occasions, this experiencer knew at a deep level that this was an otherworldly communication of some kind. Here are a couple of other collected examples. The first is an excerpt from Ron Quinn's book, The Little People, and it's called Flowers on the Hill. In the spring of 1973, Michael and Sally Ellsworth were out on a Sunday drive through the back country near the community of Liberty, New York. As he was travelling along a lonely road, Michael's car had a flat. While he was in the process of changing the tyre, Sally strolled off, taking in the surrounding scenery. A spring shower had passed earlier, and the air was still fresh with nature's aroma. As she was standing beside a hill covered with wild flowers, she suddenly heard what appeared to be tiny sounds of giggling and laughter. It was coming from the direction of some flowers about 20 feet away. Looking up, she spotted some movement near the corner of the scattered flowers. Thinking it might be birds feeding among the growth, she started towards the car, where Michael was just placing the flat tire in the luggage compartment. Again came the strange giggling, but to Sally it just didn't sound like birds. She gazed intently at the spot where the unusual sounds were coming from, in hopes of seeing what was making them. To her astonishment, a tiny feminine face appeared from under the flowers, then quickly vanished from view. This was followed by more giggling and laughter. Startled by what she had seen, Sally called to Michael to come over. As he approached, Sally spotted what resembled a little hand moving beneath the leaves. Again calling to Michael, she said, "Come quickly, you must see this." She then pointed towards the flowers and told him what she'd seen. Michael burst into laughter, but this was short-lived. As they stood looking up the hill, 3 small creatures resembling 2 tiny girls and a boy emerged from the flowers and were seen scrambling up the hill through the grass. All 3 were less than a foot in height. They paused momentarily before disappearing into the brush at the crest of the hill. Both husband and wife have no doubt in their minds what they saw that spring afternoon. Could imagination have played a hand in it? No way, say Sally and Michael. They were little people, and not small animals. And this reported encounter is from Simon Young's Fairy Census. This is from a male in Michigan in the US. It took place in the 1990s between the ages of 21 and 30 in Woodland, and they were on their own. It took place in the evening between 6 and 9 p.m. While out walking after having eaten dinner on a moonless night, taking a shortcut through the woods behind the library, I heard the sound of small, indistinct voices talking, whispering and laughing from trees around me. I could see nothing, but caught glimpses of small black shadows moving in the branches. The night was pitch black and impossible to see, and though I had walked the path through the woods many times, and houses with lights could not have been more than 100 yards away, I felt quite lost and confused of my way. On a whim, I reached into a pocket of the backpack I was carrying, and found a small metal bell that I had found someplace and kept as an oddment. I tinkled it for a few minutes and said aloud, "Here, you can have this," and hooked it on the nearest branch I could see in the darkness. The woods seemed a little less dark, and the path, though not visible, was suddenly discernible underfoot as a flat clear place to walk. I quickly found myself out of the woods and on the sidewalk, and made my way straight home without looking back. I went back to look for the bell the next day, but it was nowhere in sight. I highly recommend the Fairy Census if you want to read through some first-hand accounts, and this collection is still ongoing, so if you want to provide any of your own experiences, you can go to the Fairy Investigation Society link, which is freely available on the internet, but also I will leave a link in the show notes. What's clear in both accounts is the sense of knowing that this is something other than mundane reality. In the Woodland account, the male instinctively reaches for the small metal bell that he possibly had no use for up until that moment. And in the previous excerpt, the woman is suddenly alert to the fact that this is not birdsong, and makes it her business to remain at the spot and uncover the source. Contrary to movie plots, when something uncanny presents itself to us, we often lean into that experience rather than run for the hills, unless instinctively we sense that running is the best solution, which it very rarely is. The connections made often feel very natural, but at the same time you recognize them as other. They are potently mysterious, and the shaking truth of these meetings are felt at a cellular level. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for being here and staying to the end. Please do rate and review if you have time, and please subscribe and share. You can write to me at scarletofthefae.com. I love these conversations, and every time I do speak to somebody, I feel more convinced that we can make the changes we need to see in the world, and we already are. There are many of us who are ready to aid this transition to spiritual enlightenment. So be true to yourself, trust your trip, and always remain curious.